Mobile, Alabama, 1906. The summer heat clung to everything like a desperate lover, thick and unyielding. Emma Blackwood wiped sweat from her brow as she trudged up the gravel path toward the Rivera residence, her medical bag heavy in her hand. As the town's only female physician, she'd earned grudging respect through years of dedicated service, though many still whispered behind her back. The Rivera home stood apart from others, a grand Victorian structure with peeling paint and a wraparound porch that had once signified prosperity. Now it seemed to slouch beneath the weight of its own history. The family had immigrated from Spain 2 decades prior, but remained outsiders in the deeply segregated South. "Dr. Blackwood, thank the Lord you've come." Maria Rivera pulled open the door before Emma could knock. Her usually immaculate appearance had given way to dishevelment, hair escaping its pins, dark circles beneath bloodshot eyes. "Mrs. Rivera, you mentioned in your note that Lucia is unwell." Emma stepped inside, immediately noting the peculiar scent, not the usual sickness smell, but something sharper, like metal and old pennies. "It's more than that." Maria crossed herself. "It's happening again, just like the others." Emma followed her up the creaking stairs, passing framed photographs of Rivera children, 5 beautiful faces. But Emma knew only 2 remained alive. The others had succumbed to what the town called the Rivera curse, sudden, inexplicable deaths, each child found in their beds, with no signs of struggle, only blue-tinged lips and wide, terrified eyes. Lucia lay in her bed, her 9-year-old frame barely making a bump beneath the quilt. Her breathing came shallow and quick, skin ashen except for 2 fevered spots of color high on her cheekbones. "When did this begin?" Emma asked, setting down her bag and pressing her palm to the child's forehead. "Last night, after Father Morales visited." Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. "He blessed the children with the holy water." Emma nodded, though she placed no stock in such things. She'd attended medical school in Philadelphia, where science, not superstition, explained illness. Yet she'd learned to respect the beliefs of her patients, especially here in the Deep South, where faith and fear intertwined like kudzu vines. "Has she vomited? Complained of pain?" Emma withdrew her stethoscope. "No, just weakness, growing weaker with each hour." Maria twisted her wedding band. "It's exactly how it started with Gabriel and Sophia and little Antonio." As Emma examined the girl, she noticed something odd. Tiny red marks, barely visible, on the child's wrists and neck. They weren't bruises exactly, more like pinpricks. "Has Lucia mentioned anyone unusual visiting her?" Emma asked carefully. Maria stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I'm simply gathering information." Emma kept her voice neutral. "Children often see things adults miss." She mentioned a shadow." Maria's voice cracked. "Said it comes when everyone's asleep, stands by her bed and watches." A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature crawled up Emma's spine. 3 Rivera children dead in 5 years, each preceded by these same symptoms. And now Lucia. "I'll do everything I can," Emma promised, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Medical science had failed the Rivera family before. Would this time be any different? Outside the bedroom window, church bells tolled the hour, 6 long, hollow peals. Night would fall soon, and in this house, darkness brought more than mere absence of light. Father Dominic Morales knelt before the altar of St. Augustine's Catholic Church, his prayer beads clicking rhythmically through his gnarled fingers. At 68, he'd served this parish for nearly 3 decades, ministering to the faithful and the desperate alike. The Rivera family fell firmly into the latter category. "Father?" A voice interrupted his devotions. "Dr. Blackwood is here to see you." Dominic rose, joints protesting. Emma Blackwood stood in the doorway, her practical skirt and shirtwaist dusty from the road, medical bag clutched like a shield. "Doctor, this is unexpected." He gestured toward a wooden pew. "Please." Emma remained standing. "I've just come from the Rivera home. Lucia is ill." "May God protect her." Dominic crossed himself. "I shall pray for her recovery." Maria mentioned you visited yesterday. Blessed the children with holy water. Something flickered in the priest's eyes. Caution, perhaps fear. A routine blessing, nothing more. Father Morales, this is the fourth Rivera child to fall ill in this manner. As a physician, I cannot ignore such a pattern. And as a man of God, I cannot ignore the presence of evil. His voice dropped. You seek scientific explanations, doctor, but some maladies stem from darker sources. Emma's jaw tightened. Are you suggesting demonic possession in 1906? I suggest nothing. I merely observe. Dominic moved toward a small side altar where dozens of candles flickered. The Rivera family came to Mobile carrying old burdens, ancient sins. What sins? Emma demanded. They're hard-working people who've lost 3 children. Have you met Mr. Rivera? The priest lit another candle. Truly met him? Emma hesitated. Eduardo Rivera was rarely present during her visits, always at the docks where he worked as a foreman, or so Maria claimed. Eduardo Rivera made a fortune before coming to America. Dominic's voice was barely audible above the hiss of candle wax. Not through honest labor, but through darker means. What are you implying? In Spain, there were rumors, children who disappeared near his properties, rituals, blood offerings for prosperity. The priest turned to face her. When authorities began asking questions, the Riveras fled to America. Emma scoffed. That's absurd, superstitious gossip. Is it? Dominic approached, the smell of incense clinging to his robes. Have you noticed that deaths occur only when the moon wanes? Have you wondered why Eduardo is never home when his children fall ill? Or why each child dies before sunrise, always before sunrise? Despite herself, Emma felt cold unease spreading through her chest. These are coincidences. There are no coincidences in God's world, Doctor. Dominic returned to the altar, retrieving a small crystal vial. Take this, holy water from the Vatican itself. I deal in medicine, not magical thinking. Then consider it a placebo if you must. He pressed the vial into her reluctant hand. But should you witness something science cannot explain tonight, use it. As Emma turned to leave, the priest called after her. Watch Eduardo Rivera carefully, Doctor, and whatever happens, do not leave those children alone with their father when darkness falls. Outside, the Alabama sun was beginning its descent, painting Mobile in ominous shades of crimson and gold. Emma pocketed the vial, telling herself she was humoring an old man's delusions. Yet as she headed back toward the Rivera home, she found herself walking faster than necessary, racing the approaching night. The Rivera household had transformed by evening. Candles blazed in every window, their flames unnaturally still in the stifling air. Neighbors had gathered on the street, maintaining a respectful distance while exchanging whispers behind raised hands. The Rivera curse had become local legend, fodder for fireside tales and warnings to misbehaving children. Emma pushed through the spectators, ignoring their stares. Inside, she found Maria in the parlor, rosary beads wrapped around white-knuckled fingers, lips moving in silent prayer. Any change? Emma asked. Maria shook her head. Eduardo sent a message. He won't be home tonight. Again? Emma couldn't keep the edge from her voice. His daughter might be dying. The shipping company has a major arrival. He can't leave. Maria's tone suggested this explanation had worn thin, even for her. He's a good man, Doctor. A good father. Emma bit back her doubt. I'd like to stay tonight. Monitor Lucia's condition. Relief flooded Maria's face. You would do that. People will talk. Let them. Emma had long ago stopped caring what Mobile society thought of her unconventional choices. I'll need to retrieve additional supplies from my office. Will you be all right alone briefly? Maria glanced toward the stairs. Jacob is with his sister. We'll be fine until you return. Emma hurried through town as dusk deepened into night. Her office sat above the pharmacy on Dauphin Street, a small but orderly space where she treated everything from typhoid to broken hearts. She gathered quinine, digitalis, and morphine, though instinct told her none would help Lucia Rivera. As she locked up, a movement across the street caught her eye. A tall figure in a dark coat stood beneath a gaslight, watching. When their eyes met, the man turned quickly away, but not before Emma recognized him. Eduardo Rivera. Not at the docks as Maria believed, not working through the night. Here, lurking outside a physician's office while his daughter languished. Emma clutched her medical bag tighter and made a split-second decision to follow. Eduardo moved with purpose through Mobile's darkening streets, away from the docks, away from his home. He turned down an alley near the old market, then disappeared through a narrow doorway beneath a sign written in faded Spanish. She approached cautiously, noting the peculiar symbols carved into the doorframe. Nothing Christian, certainly nothing Catholic. From inside came the low murmur of voices, the sharp smell of unusual incense, and something else, the metallic scent she'd detected in Lucia's room. "Can I help you, doctor?" The voice behind her nearly stopped her heart. Emma whirled to find Jacob Rivera, the eldest surviving child at 14, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Jacob, what are you doing here? You should be with your sister. I could ask you the same." His voice had changed since she'd last treated him for influenza, deeper now, with an edge that belied his years. "This is no place for a lady doctor. I saw your father. My father is working at the docks." The lie came smoothly. "You're mistaken." "Jacob, I know what I saw." The boy stepped closer. In the faint light from the building, Emma noticed something dark staining his shirt cuff, something that looked remarkably like blood. "Go back to our house, Dr. Blackwood." It wasn't a suggestion. "Lucia needs you." "And you? Where are you going?" Jacob smiled, an expression that transformed his boyish face into something ancient and cold. "To help my father, of course. Family tradition." As he brushed past her toward the door, Emma caught a glimpse of something tucked into his waistband, a knife with an ornate handle, symbols matching those on the doorframe. Fear crystallized in Emma's chest. She thought of Father Morales's warnings, of 3 dead Rivera children, of Lucia's fading life force. She turned and ran. Emma burst into the Rivera home without knocking, startling Maria from her prayers. "Where's Lucia?" Emma demanded, out of breath. "Upstairs, sleeping. I checked on her just—" Emma was already taking the stairs 2 at a time, dread propelling her forward. The door to Lucia's bedroom stood slightly ajar, a sliver of candlelight spilling into the hallway. The girl lay motionless beneath her quilt, face waxy and still. For one horrible moment, Emma thought she'd arrived too late. Then Lucia's chest rose slightly, still alive, but barely. "Lucia," Emma whispered, approaching the bed. "Can you hear me?" The child's eyelids fluttered. "Doctor?" Her voice was thread-thin. The shadow came again. Emma smoothed damp hair from Lucia's forehead. "What shadow, sweetheart? It whispers things about blood and moons and sacrifice." Lucia's eyes suddenly widened, focusing on something beyond Emma's shoulder. "It's here." Emma whirled around, half expecting to find Jacob or Eduardo in the doorway. Instead, she saw only the bedroom, the rocking chair draped with Lucia's pinafore, the small bookshelf, the crucifix on the wall. But something felt wrong. The air had grown heavier, colder despite the summer heat. The candle flame bent horizontally, as if in a strong breeze, though no window was open. "Maria!" Emma called, her medical training warring with rising panic. "Bring me hot water and clean cloths!" No response came from downstairs. The house had fallen preternaturally silent, no creaking floorboards, no ticking clocks, no sounds of Maria's movement. Emma reached for her medical bag, only to freeze as the candle suddenly extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. In the same instant, something cold brushed against her neck, like fingers, but not quite solid. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. A soft laugh answered, neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but ancient and hungry. The scent of metal and pennies grew overwhelming. Emma fumbled in her pocket, fingers closing around Father Morales's vial. Superstition and nonsense, her rational mind insisted. Yet she uncorked it anyway, sprinkling drops before her in the darkness. A hiss filled the room, like water on hot metal, followed by that same inhuman laugh, now from a different corner. "You cannot save her," a voice whispered directly into Emma's ear. "She is promised, as were the others." Promised to what? Emma backed toward Lucia's bed, shielding the child with her body. To the old ways. To the pact. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Blood of their blood, freely given to ensure prosperity. Emma's mind raced through the pieces. Eduardo's mysterious wealth, children dying as the moon waned, Jacob with a ritual knife, ancient symbols, and Father Morales's warnings about blood offerings. "A sacrifice," she whispered, horror dawning. "You're sacrificing your own children." The temperature in the room plummeted. Through the window, Emma could see the moon, almost gone now, just a thin crescent. Lucia moaned behind her, growing weaker with each passing minute. Emma uncorked the vial again, this time pouring the entire contents in a circle around Lucia's bed. The liquid glowed faintly in the darkness, illuminating the floor with soft blue light. "By any god that listens," Emma said, her scientific mind surrendering to desperate faith, "I forbid you to take this child." A scream erupted from downstairs, Maria's voice high and terrified. Emma hesitated, torn between the woman below and the child behind her. "Go!" Lucia whispered. "Save Mama!" Emma squeezed the girl's hand. "Stay inside the circle. No matter what you hear, don't leave it." She fumbled her way to the hallway, nearly colliding with Maria as the woman staggered up the stairs. "Eduardo and Jacob," Maria gasped, blood trickling from a cut on her cheek. "They've come home. They're not themselves." From the bottom of the stairs, Eduardo Rivera's voice called up, eerily calm. "Maria, bring the girl down. It's time." "Bar the door," Emma whispered, pushing Maria into Lucia's room and sliding a heavy bureau across the doorway. It wouldn't hold long against determined intruders, but might buy precious minutes. Maria stumbled toward her daughter's bed, collapsing beside it in a heap of skirts and terror. What have they done? What have I allowed? Heavy footsteps ascended the stairs, deliberately slow, as if savoring their fear. Emma's mind raced through options. The windows were too high for escape. She had no weapon except medical instruments, and Lucia was too weak to move. "Doctor!" Eduardo's voice came through the door, deceptively gentle. "This doesn't concern you. Leave now, and I'll ensure your safety." "3 children dead already," Emma called back. "How many more, Mr. Rivera?" A low chuckle. "You misunderstand. My children aren't victims. They're participants in something greater than themselves, a covenant made generations ago." The doorknob rattled. Wood creaked as pressure was applied. "Our family's prosperity comes with a price," Eduardo continued. "Every generation, the youngest must be given back. It's an honor." "It's murder," Emma spat. "It's tradition." The door shuddered against its frame. "The shadow must be fed. 4 children every generation. We've given 3. Lucia will complete our obligation." Maria wailed, clutching her daughter. "I didn't know. All these years I thought they were just dying." "You knew," Eduardo's voice hardened. "You chose not to see." The bureau inched away from the door with each impact. Emma glanced desperately around the room, eyes landing on the small vial in her hand, now empty of holy water. An idea formed. Not from her medical training, but from childhood summers spent with her grandmother, a woman who kept to older ways. "Maria," Emma whispered urgently, "do you have salt in the house?" Maria looked bewildered but nodded. "In my apron pocket. I was preparing dinner when—" Emma grabbed the small cloth pouch, pouring its contents along the doorway, just as the bureau gave way. The door flew open, revealing Eduardo and Jacob Rivera, their eyes reflecting candlelight like animals in darkness. They stopped at the threshold, gazes fixed on the line of salt. "Folkish nonsense," Eduardo sneered, though he made no move to cross it. Behind him, Jacob held the ornate knife Emma had glimpsed earlier. Its blade gleamed with something dark and wet. "The moon is almost gone, father. We must finish." Eduardo nodded. "Indeed." He looked past Emma to his wife and daughter. "Maria, bring Lucia now, or Jacob will be taken instead. The shadow must have one tonight." Maria's face crumpled with impossible choice. "Eduardo, please." 4 generations we've honored the pact," Eduardo hissed. 4 generations of Rivera prosperity built on sacred sacrifice. Would you doom our family for sentiment? Emma positioned herself between the door and Lucia's bed. "You'll have to go through me first." Eduardo smiled, a terrible expression devoid of humanity. "Gladly." He reached into his coat, withdrawing not a weapon, but a small pouch similar to Maria's. From it, he produced a pinch of black powder, which he sprinkled over the salt line. The granules sizzled on contact, emitting thin wisps of greenish smoke. Eduardo stepped over the neutralized barrier, Jacob close behind. "The old ways require blood," Eduardo said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "But not just any blood. Family blood, freely given in the hour before dawn, when the moon is darkest. There's nothing free about murdering children," Emma retorted, backing toward the window. Eduardo shrugged. "The first is always the hardest." Gabriel fought, though Jacob helped hold him down. Sophia understood better, barely struggled at all. Antonio was too young to understand, but at least he didn't cry. Jacob nodded, pride evident in his posture. "I've been helping since I was 10. Father says I have a gift for the ritual." The casual recitation of horrors struck Emma like physical blows. These weren't possessed men or mindless cultists. They were calculating killers who had systematically sacrificed their own family. "And what happens when you run out of children to murder?" Emma asked, stalling for time as she inched toward her medical bag. Eduardo smiled thinly. "Maria is young enough to bear more." From the bed, Maria made a strangled sound of revulsion. Lucia lay silent beside her, conscious but fading, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Enough delay," Eduardo nodded to Jacob. "Begin." The boy approached the bed, knife raised, expression serene. Maria threw herself over Lucia, shielding her daughter with her body. "Move aside, mother," Jacob said calmly. "Never." Maria's voice had found new strength in desperation. Jacob hesitated, looking to his father for guidance. In that moment of distraction, Emma lunged for her medical bag, fingers closing around a syringe of morphine. Not a weapon by design, but in sufficient quantity. Eduardo saw her movement and sprang forward with unexpected agility for his size. His hand closed around Emma's throat, lifting her from the floor with terrible strength. "I offered you safety," he growled, tightening his grip. "Now you'll join them in feeding the shadow." Black spots danced in Emma's vision as her lungs screamed for air. With fading consciousness, she drove the syringe into Eduardo's forearm and depressed the plunger. His grip loosened in surprise, then tightened again in fury. "What did you—" The morphine acted quickly. Eduardo's eyes widened, then grew unfocused. His massive frame swayed, fingers slipping from Emma's throat as he stumbled backward. "Father?" Jacob turned, momentarily forgetting his task. Eduardo collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit heavily on the floor. The dose hadn't been enough to kill, but sufficient to incapacitate. Jacob looked between his fallen father and the women, uncertainty replacing his earlier confidence. Without Eduardo's dominating presence, he seemed suddenly younger, smaller. "The ritual must be completed," he said, but his voice wavered. "The shadow is a lie," Emma rasped, her bruised throat making speech painful. "A story to justify murder." "No!" Jacob raised the knife again. "I've seen it. It comes when we make the offerings. It blesses our family." "It uses your family," Emma countered. "And you've helped it." Something flickered in Jacob's eyes, doubt, perhaps even remorse. His gaze drifted to his unconscious father, then to his terrified mother and fading sister. Outside, the faintest hint of grey appeared on the horizon. Dawn approached. "It's too late anyway," Jacob whispered. "The offering must be made before first light." As if summoned by his words, the room grew colder. Candles sputtered and died. In the corner furthest from the window, darkness gathered and deepened, taking on density and form. The shadow had come to claim its due. The shadow writhed in the corner, neither solid nor insubstantial, a rip in reality through which something ancient peered into their world. It had no discernible features, yet Emma felt its attention fix upon her with predatory focus. "You see?" Jacob's voice held vindication. "It comes for payment." The shadow pulsed, expanding to touch the ceiling, then contracting to human size. A sound emanated from it, not speech, but a hunger-given voice, a promise of agony so profound that Maria covered her ears and wept. "What is it?" Emma whispered. "Our benefactor," Jacob replied with the rehearsed quality of catechism. "The guardian of Rivera prosperity. For generations it has blessed our family with wealth and influence. In return, we provide sustenance." The shadow extended a tendril toward Lucia's bed, testing the boundary created by the holy water. Where it touched the invisible barrier, it recoiled with a hiss of displeasure. "It can't cross," Emma realized. "The circle protects her." Jacob's expression darkened. "Temporarily, but circles can be broken." He lunged suddenly, not toward Lucia, but toward Emma, knife slashing wildly. Emma dodged, but the blade caught her arm, opening a long gash from elbow to wrist. Blood spattered across the floor, and more importantly, across the holy water line. The barrier sizzled where blood met blessed water, weakening its protection. The shadow surged forward, extending more tendrils toward the bed. Maria screamed, clutching Lucia closer. "Take me instead, please!" The shadow paused, seeming to consider this offer. Then it retreated slightly, coalescing into a more defined shape. Vaguely humanoid, but with proportions that hurt the eye to observe. "It accepts your sacrifice," Jacob said, surprise evident in his voice. "A mother instead of a child. The covenant allows this substitution, though it's rarely offered." "No," Lucia whispered weakly. "Mama, no." Maria kissed her daughter's forehead. "Hush, mi tesoro. A mother protects her children. I should have done so sooner." She stood, facing the shadow with trembling dignity. "I offer myself freely in place of my daughter. Take my life and consider our family's debt paid in full." The shadow rippled in what might have been agreement. It extended a tendril not toward Maria, but toward Jacob, who still held the ritual knife. Understanding dawned on the boy's face. "I am to complete the ritual." His voice held equal parts fear and pride. "Even with father unconscious, I can fulfill our obligation." "No," Emma said firmly, pressing a cloth to her bleeding arm. "This ends now." Jacob laughed bitterly. "How? The shadow won't leave without its offering. Either Mother dies or Lucia dies. Those are the only options." Emma thought desperately. The morphine had neutralized Eduardo, but Jacob remained committed to the ritual. The shadow blocked their exit, and dawn, which might banish it, was still minutes away. Minutes Lucia might not have. An idea formed. Dangerous, perhaps futile, but their only chance. Emma recalled her grandmother's teachings about contracts and covenants with other worldly entities. Such arrangements often hinged on precise wording and conditions. "Jacob," she said carefully, "what exactly does your family covenant require? The exact terms." The boy frowned. "Blood sacrifice of Rivera descendants, 1 per generation, to ensure prosperity." 4 per generation, Emma corrected. "You said so yourself. Gabriel, Sophia, Antonio, and now Lucia or Maria." "Yes, but the covenant specifies Rivera blood, correct? Not necessarily Rivera children?" Jacob hesitated. "I suppose so. Any of Rivera blood would satisfy the requirement." Emma stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the shadow. "Then I propose a different offering." She pointed to Eduardo's unconscious form, the source of the bloodline, the one who perpetuated this cycle of murder. Take him instead. The shadow pulsed, tendrils writhing with what might have been interest or agitation. Jacob's eyes widened. That's impossible. Father is the covenant keeper. He cannot be the sacrifice. Why not? Emma challenged. He carries the Rivera blood. The shadow wants blood and life. Does it truly care whose? The shadow contracted, then expanded rapidly, filling the corner with undulating darkness. It seemed to be considering Emma's words. Jacob looked uncertain. The covenant has always required the youngest. It's tradition. A tradition of child murder, Emma said sharply. Your father lied to you, Jacob. He made you complicit in killing your own siblings. To maintain our prosperity, Jacob insisted, though doubt crept into his voice. For the family's future. What future? One where you someday sacrifice your own children. Where does it end? The first ray of dawnlight pierced the window, landing on the floorboards between them. The shadow recoiled slightly, but did not retreat. Time was running out. If the shadow doesn't receive its offering before dawn, what happens? Emma asked. Jacob swallowed hard. It takes what it wants. Anyone. Everyone. Without the ritual to control it, the shadow surged forward suddenly, no longer waiting or negotiating. One tendril wrapped around Maria's ankle, another reached for Lucia. Both women screamed in unison as cold darkness touched living flesh. "Stop!" Jacob cried, raising the knife. "I'll complete the ritual!" But instead of moving toward his mother or sister, he turned to his father's slumped form. For a moment, he stood frozen in indecision, the knife trembling in his hand. "He killed them," Jacob whispered. "My brothers, my sister. He made me help." "Yes," Emma said quietly, "and he would have killed Lucia too." Jacob's face contorted with grief and rage. "I thought it was necessary, sacred." "It was murder," Emma said. "Nothing more." The shadow pulsed impatiently, tendrils tightening around Maria and reaching for Lucia. Dawn light crept further into the room, but too slowly to save them. Jacob knelt beside his father. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though it wasn't clear to whom he spoke. Then, with sudden resolve, he plunged the knife into Eduardo's chest. The shadow released Maria immediately, abandoning Lucia to surge toward Eduardo's body. It enveloped him completely, a cocoon of living darkness that pulsated with horrible purpose. Eduardo's eyes flew open in his final moments, aware enough to understand his fate. He reached toward Jacob, mouth working soundlessly, before the shadow consumed him entirely. A terrible sound filled the room, not quite a scream, not quite laughter, as the shadow contracted, drawing into itself until it became a pinprick of absolute blackness, then vanished completely. Eduardo's body remained, but something essential had been extracted. His eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling, mouth frozen in a rictus of terror. Jacob dropped the knife, hands shaking. "Is it over?" Emma moved cautiously to check Lucia. The girl's breathing had steadied, color returning to her cheeks as if a weight had been lifted. "I think so," Emma said, though uncertainty lingered. Covenants with darkness rarely ended cleanly. Dawn light now filled the room, washing away shadows both natural and unnatural. Outside, Mobile stirred to life, unaware of the night's horrors. Maria held Lucia close, rocking gently. "What have we done?" "What was necessary," Emma answered, binding her wounded arm. "But there will be consequences." She looked at Eduardo's body, then at Jacob, a boy forced into manhood through terrible means. His hands were stained with family blood, his soul scarred by years of complicity. The Rivera curse might be broken, but its legacy would continue. Some shadows couldn't be banished by daylight alone. 3 days later, Mobile buzzed with scandalous whispers. Eduardo Rivera, respected businessman, devoted family man, found dead in his daughter's bedroom, stabbed through the heart with a ceremonial knife. His son Jacob had confessed immediately, claiming self-defense against a father gone mad with grief over his children's mysterious illnesses. The sheriff, A pragmatic man with little patience for complex investigations seemed content with this explanation. The knife bore only Jacob's fingerprints, and Eduardo's business rivals were quick to share rumors of his increasing instability and obsession with occult practices. Emma sat in her office, recording her official findings on Lucia Rivera's recovery. The medical language felt inadequate. Patient experienced rapid improvement following resolution of household stress. But anything closer to truth would be dismissed as feminine hysteria or worse. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Father Morales stood in the doorway, looking older than his years. "May I?" He gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Emma nodded, setting aside her notes. "Lucia continues to improve. She's eating well, sleeping without nightmares." "And the other matter?" Morales lowered his voice. "Resolved, for now." Emma had shared a sanitized version of that night's events with the priest, omitting the shadow's manifestation, but confirming Eduardo's role in his children's deaths. "For now," Morales echoed, "such darkness rarely disappears completely." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" The priest sighed heavily. "Covenants like the one Eduardo Rivera maintained, they span generations. The entity may have accepted his sacrifice, but the original terms remain. You think it will return? For Lucia? Perhaps not Lucia. Perhaps not for years." Morales leaned forward. "But sacrifices interrupted often demand compensation." A chill ran through Emma despite the officer's warmth. Jacob killed his father to save his sister. Surely that counts for something. It may have delayed matters. But the Riveras have another child now. Emma's head snapped up. "What?" "Maria is with child. About 2 months along, she believes." Morales's expression was grave. She only realized after that night. The implications settled like lead in Emma's stomach. Another Rivera child, born into a bloodline marked by an unholy covenant. The cycle threatening to begin anew. "What can be done?" she asked. "I've advised Maria to leave Mobile, to change their name, break all connections with the past." Morales twisted his prayer beads. "Whether that will be enough, only God knows." After the priest left, Emma stared out her window at Mobile's sunlit streets. Science had failed to explain the Rivera deaths, just as religion had failed to prevent them. Only direct intervention, a desperate gamble with forces beyond understanding, had saved Lucia. What would save the unborn child when darkness eventually returned to collect its due? Emma made a decision then, one that would alter her life's course. She began writing a letter to her former professor at medical college, requesting information about positions in Philadelphia. Mobile had been her home for years, but perhaps it was time to follow the Rivera's example and seek a fresh start elsewhere. As twilight descended, she walked to St. Augustine's church. Candles flickered in the empty sanctuary as she knelt before the altar, not to pray but to think. A sound behind her, soft footsteps on stone, made her turn. Jacob Rivera stood in the shadows, thinner than before, eyes haunted with knowledge no 15-year-old should possess. "Dr. Blackwood," he acknowledged. "May I join you?" Emma nodded, and he knelt beside her, staring at the altar's crucifix. "We leave tomorrow," he said quietly. "Mother, Lucia, and me, north to Boston. We'll use Mother's maiden name, Galvez." A wise decision. Jacob's hands fidgeted in his lap. "I keep seeing it. The shadow. Not really, but in dreams. In corners of my vision when I'm tired." He swallowed hard. "Do you think it's watching me?" Emma chose her words carefully. "I think what you experienced would haunt anyone. With time and distance, the dreams will fade. And if they don't," his voice cracked, "if it finds us again, then you'll face it with the knowledge and strength you have now." Emma placed her hand briefly on his shoulder. "You chose to protect your sister. Remember that, whatever comes." The years passed with merciful quietude. Emma relocated to Philadelphia in the winter of 1907, establishing a modest practice that gradually earned respect from even the most traditional physicians. She specialized in women's and children's health, her experiences in Mobile having honed both her medical skills and her sensitivity to sufferings that defied conventional diagnosis. She kept no direct contact with the Rivera family, now the Galvez family, but maintained a discreet correspondence with Father Morales, who occasionally shared news gleaned from Maria's letters to the church. Lucia had blossomed into a healthy young woman with scholarly ambitions. Jacob had found work as a carpenter's apprentice, his hands now creating rather than destroying. Maria had delivered a son they named Thomas, a robust child who showed no signs of the mysterious ailments that had plagued his siblings. For almost 7 years, Emma allowed herself to believe the shadow had been appeased by Eduardo's sacrifice. Then, in the spring of 1913, a telegram arrived from Boston. Darkness returning, stop. Thomas ill, stop. Same symptoms. Stop, need your help. Stop, Maria. Emma stood in her office, the yellow paper trembling in her hand. Outside, Philadelphia bustled with springtime activity, but within her a winter took hold. She had established a life here, colleagues who respected her, patients who needed her, even a tentative courtship with a widowed professor of literature. Yet she had known somehow that this day would come. The shadow had merely been dormant, not defeated. By nightfall, she was on a northbound train, medical bag packed with conventional remedies and other less orthodox items. Salt, blessed water, silver and herbs whose properties her grandmother had taught her long ago. Science had failed the Riveras before. Emma would not make the same mistake twice. Boston greeted her with chilly rain and crowded streets. The address Maria had provided led to a modest apartment building in a predominantly Spanish neighborhood where immigrants from various regions had created a community bound by shared language and displacement. Jacob, now 22, opened the door at her knock. The boy she remembered had grown into a solemn man, his face bearing premature lines of worry, eyes holding the wariness of one who had glimpsed behind reality's veil. "Dr. Blackwood," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you've come." The apartment was small but meticulously kept, reflecting Maria's determination to create normalcy despite their history. Family photographs adorned the walls, Lucia in a graduation dress, Jacob beside his carpentry master, Maria holding an infant Thomas. No pictures of Eduardo or the lost children existed in this new life. "Where is he?" Emma asked, removing her rain-dappled coat. "This way." Jacob led her to a small bedroom, where Maria sat beside a child's bed, rosary clutched in trembling hands. Thomas lay beneath a quilt, his 7-year-old frame unnaturally still, skin pale, except for 2 feverish spots high on his cheeks, exactly as Lucia had appeared that night in Mobile. Maria looked up, years of careful rebuilding crumbling in her expression. "It found us," she whispered. "After all this time, it found us." Emma approached the bed, setting down her medical bag. "When did the symptoms begin?" 3 days ago. Maria's voice was hollow with exhaustion. First weakness, then fever that comes and goes, just like before. Emma examined the boy, finding the same pinprick marks on his wrists and neck that she had noticed on Lucia. His pulse was rapid but weak, his breathing shallow. "Has he mentioned seeing anything? A shadow, perhaps?" Maria nodded, tears spilling. "Last night. Said it stands in the corner watching him. Said it knows his real name. Rivera, not Galvez." Emma glanced toward the corner Maria indicated. Nothing unusual was visible, but the air felt slightly colder there, as if something had recently departed or was temporarily hidden. "Lucia?" Emma asked, unpacking her supplies. "At the university library. We haven't told her yet." Jacob's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "She barely remembers that night. We thought it better." "To protect her," Emma finished. "Understandable." She worked methodically, first performing conventional examinations, temperature, pulse, pupillary response, before moving to less orthodox measures. She sprinkled salt across the threshold, placed silver coins beneath Thomas's pillow, and drew symbols in blessed water around his bed. "Will this save him?" Maria asked, hope warring with skepticism. "These are precautions, not solutions," Emma admitted. "The Shadow accepted Eduardo's sacrifice 7 years ago, but clearly the covenant remains active." Jacob paced by the window, watching rain streak the glass. "We changed our name, moved hundreds of miles away. What more could we have done?" "Blood oaths aren't nullified by distance or deception," Emma said quietly. "The Shadow found you because Thomas carries Rivera blood, regardless of the name he bears." "Then we're trapped forever?" Maria's voice cracked. "Generation after generation, losing our children to this thing?" Emma considered her next words carefully. During her years in Philadelphia, she had consulted discreetly with experts in various esoteric traditions, not out of belief, but from scientific curiosity about cultural practices surrounding unexplained phenomena. One conversation in particular returned to her now. "There may be a way to end the covenant permanently," she said slowly, "but it carries significant risk." Hope flickered in Maria's exhausted eyes. "Anything. We'll try anything. The entity seeks Rivera blood as payment," Emma explained. "But covenants like this have specific terms, specific rituals that must be followed. Jacob, you said the Shadow took your father when he was offered a substitute. This suggests the original terms might be negotiable. You want to bargain with it?" Jacob looked incredulous. "That thing isn't human. It doesn't reason like we do." "Not bargain," Emma clarified. "Confront. Challenge the covenant's validity through ritual means." She reached into her bag, withdrawing a small leather-bound journal filled with notes and diagrams collected over years of research. In traditions across cultures, blood covenants can be broken if the original terms are proven invalid or if a stronger claim is established. She turned to a particular page. "We need to know exactly when and how this covenant began." "How far back does your family history go?" Jacob and Maria exchanged glances. "Father kept documents," Jacob said reluctantly. "Family records dating back to Spain. I took them when we fled Mobile. They're hidden beneath the floorboards in my room." "Bring them," Emma directed. "Every page, every fragment. The answer lies in your history." As Jacob left to retrieve the documents, Emma turned to Maria. "We'll need Lucia as well. The Shadow targets Rivera children. All remaining blood descendants should be present for this confrontation." Maria shook her head vehemently. "No, she's safe at the university. She has a future." "No Rivera descendant will truly be safe until this ends," Emma said gently. "Lucia included." Maria's shoulders slumped in defeat. "She has lectures until evening. I'll send Jacob for her afterward." Thunder rolled outside as Boston's spring rain intensified. Thomas stirred in his sleep, whimpering. In the corner of the room, shadows deepened, despite the lamp's steady glow. Night would fall soon, and with darkness, the entity would return to claim its due. Lucia Galvez, formerly Rivera, arrived as dusk settled over Boston. At 20, she had grown into a poised young woman with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing that spoke of her academic success. She wore the modest but fashionable attire of a university student, her dark hair arranged in a practical style beneath a rain-dampened hat. Recognition flickered in her expression when she saw Emma. "Dr. Blackwood? From Alabama?" "Hello, Lucia," Emma greeted her. "I wish our reunion came under better circumstances." Confusion gave way to alarm as Lucia took in the scene, her mother's tear-stained face, Jacob's grim demeanor, Thomas's sickbed surrounded by unfamiliar symbols. "What's happening?" She removed her wet coat, movements deliberately controlled. "Mother's note mentioned only that Thomas was ill." "Sit down, querida," Maria said softly. "There are things we've never told you. About our family, about why we left Mobile." As Maria and Jacob recounted the Rivera family history, the covenant, the sacrifices, Eduardo's death, Lucia's composed facade gradually crumbled. By the time they finished, she sat rigid with shock, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I remember pieces," she whispered. "Nightmares I thought were just dreams. A cold presence, pain." She looked at Emma. "You were there. You stopped it." "Temporarily," Emma corrected. "The covenant remains active, as Thomas's condition proves." On the bed, the boy slept fitfully, occasionally murmuring words in Spanish too soft to distinguish. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, rain lashing against windows that reflected their tense gathering. Jacob spread yellow documents across the kitchen table, baptismal records, property deeds, journals and letters, spanning nearly 2 centuries of Rivera history. Most were written in archaic Spanish, which Maria translated in a low voice. "Here," Emma pointed to a journal entry dated 1726. "This mentions El Pacto, the pact." Maria leaned closer, translating, "Today marks 40 years since grandfather sealed the pact with the Watcher in shadow. 4 children given, 40 years of prosperity. Now, my own obligation begins." She looked up, horror dawning. "This goes back centuries." Emma scanned the surrounding pages. "Is there any mention of how the original covenant was established, the specific terms?" Jacob shuffled through documents, extracting a brittle letter. "This is older, from 1686. Maria read slowly, her voice faltering. "In my desperation I called upon forces my priests would condemn. The merchant Santiago offered introduction to an entity older than their Christ, one that trades in blood but pays in gold. 4 lives each generation, freely given, to ensure Rivera prosperity for centuries to come. I have sealed this bargain with my own blood and that of my youngest sweet Catalina." Silence fell as the implications sank in. Their ancestor, Domingo Rivera, had initiated the covenant nearly 230 years earlier, sacrificing his own child to ensure family wealth. 4 lives each generation, Emma repeated thoughtfully. "And the covenant transfers to the eldest surviving son." Jacob flinched. "Like father passed it to me, though I didn't understand what I was participating in." "That's our opening," Emma said, conviction growing. "The covenant requires sacrifice freely given. Children cannot freely consent to their own deaths. The original terms were invalidated from the beginning." "Will that matter to it?" Lucia asked, skepticism evident. "Entities bound by ritual are often constrained by technicalities," Emma explained. "Like legal contracts, their power lies in precise wording and adherence to terms." "So we argue semantics with a shadow?" Jacob's voice held desperate hope beneath the sarcasm. "We perform a counter-ritual," Emma said, opening her journal. "One that acknowledges the original covenant but challenges its validity on grounds of informed consent." She outlined her plan quickly, a ceremonial refutation drawing from multiple traditions, centered around the Rivera bloodline, gathered in unity rather than sacrifice. The shadow had fed on family division for generations, parents betraying children in endless repetition. Perhaps family solidarity could break the cycle. "It's dangerous," Emma warned. "The entity won't relinquish its claim easily. Everyone present must commit fully to the ritual, without reservation or fear." Lucia stood suddenly. "I have a better idea." She retrieved her university satchel, withdrawing a heavy book bound in faded leather. "I've been researching folk traditions for my anthropology studies. This contains accounts of similar covenants across cultures, including methods of dissolution." She turned to a marked page. "According to this, blood pacts require a bloodline to continue. If the bloodline ends, the covenant becomes void." "You're suggesting we all die?" Maria asked incredulously. "No," Lucia's expression was deadly serious. "I'm suggesting we end the Rivera bloodline symbolically through ritual renunciation." Emma studied the text, excitement building. "This could work. Instead of challenging the covenant's validity, we sever its connection to future generations." "How?" Jacob demanded. "Blood connects you to the covenant," Emma explained, but blood can also be symbolically transformed through ritual. Many cultures practice ceremonial adoption or renunciation of bloodlines. Lucia nodded. If we formally renounce the Rivera bloodline in the Shadow's presence, declaring ourselves no longer of Rivera descent, we cut its access to future generations, Jacob finished, understanding dawning. Thomas whimpered from the bedroom, his fever spiking. Maria rushed to his side, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "The moon!" she called urgently. "Look!" Through a break in the rain clouds, a sliver of moon was visible, waning to near darkness, just as it had been the night Eduardo died. The cycle was repeating with terrible precision. "We need to begin now," Emma said, gathering supplies. "The shadow will come at the darkest hour, just before dawn." They worked quickly, rearranging furniture to create space in the small apartment's main room. Emma directed them to place mirrors at cardinal points, explaining that reflective surfaces sometimes confused or constrained entities from other planes. Salt lines reinforced these boundaries. In the center, they placed Thomas on a makeshift pallet, his breathing growing more labored as midnight approached. Around him they positioned themselves, Maria at his head, Jacob and Lucia on either side, Emma completing the circle at his feet. "Remember," Emma cautioned, "whatever happens, whatever you see or hear, don't break the circle. The shadow will try to frighten or divide you. Stay united." They extinguished all lamps save one small candle. Rain continued to batter the windows, occasional lightning casting bizarre shadows across the room. Each carried an item representing their connection to and renunciation of the Rivera bloodline. Maria held her wedding ring, Jacob the ritual knife he had once used in his father's ceremonies, Lucia a lock of her hair, and beside Thomas lay a drop of his blood on a clean cloth. As the mantel clock struck midnight, temperature in the apartment plummeted. Frost formed on the inside of windows, despite the spring night. The candle flame bent horizontally, though no draft was perceptible. "It's coming," Jacob whispered, clutching the knife with white-knuckled intensity. In the corner furthest from their circle, darkness gathered and deepened, not the natural absence of light, but something with presence and weight. It pulsed slightly, like a heartbeat, before extending tendrils that probed the boundaries of their salt lines. Emma began the ritual, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We acknowledge the covenant established by Domingo Rivera in the year 1686. We recognize its binding upon the Rivera bloodline through generations past." The shadow contracted, then expanded rapidly, seeming to assess her words. "However," Emma continued, "we gather now to sever this covenant through the willing renunciation of Rivera blood by all surviving descendants." A low hissing filled the room, neither acceptance nor rejection, but wary attention. Maria spoke next, removing her wedding ring and placing it in a small silver bowl at the circle's center. "I, Maria Cortés Rivera, mother to Rivera children, renounce all ties to the Rivera bloodline and release my children from its burden." The shadow rippled violently, tendrils lashing against invisible barriers. Outside, lightning struck nearby, illuminating the room in harsh white light. Jacob followed, setting the ritual knife beside the ring. "I, Jacob Rivera, firstborn son and heir to the covenant, renounce my inheritance and bloodline. I am Rivera no more." The apartment began to shake, books tumbling from shelves, dishes shattering in cabinets. The shadow expanded, nearly touching the ceiling, its form becoming more defined, vaguely humanoid, but with proportions that strained comprehension. Lucia placed her lock of hair in the bowl. "I, Lucia Rivera, daughter and sister, renounce the Rivera name and blood. I claim new lineage free from this covenant." The shadow contracted suddenly, then exploded outward, extinguishing their candle and plunging the room into total darkness. A voice that was not a voice filled their minds, ancient, furious, hungry. "Blood, freely given, cannot be reclaimed. The covenant stands until the last Rivera falls." "The final renunciation must come from Thomas," Emma realized aloud. "But he's too weak to speak for himself." "Then I'll speak for him," Maria declared, gathering her son's limp body into her arms. "As his mother, as his protector." "No," the shadow's voice reverberated. "The child must choose freely." Thomas stirred in Maria's embrace, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, they gleamed with reflected darkness, as if the shadow peered through them. "Thomas," Maria whispered, clutching him tighter. "Mi hijo, can you hear me?" The boy's eyes focused slowly, recognition dawning. "Mama?" His voice was thread-thin, but clear. "The shadow man, he's here." "Yes," Maria said carefully, "but he can't hurt you if you renounce your father's bloodline." "Do you understand?" Thomas frowned, too young to fully comprehend, yet sensing the moment's gravity. "Like changing our name to Galvez." "Yes, exactly," Maria encouraged, "but deeper, in your blood." The shadow surged forward, breaking through their protective barriers. Salt scattered across floorboards, mirrors cracked in their frames. It reached for Thomas with grasping tendrils. "Quickly," Emma urged. "I'm not Rivera," Thomas said, his child's voice strengthening with each word. "I'm Thomas Galvez, not father's son, just mama's." The shadow froze, tendrils hovering inches from the boy. Something like confusion emanated from its formless mass. Emma seized the moment, lifting the silver bowl containing the family's renunciations. "By these tokens and declarations, the Rivera bloodline ends. The covenant is rendered void through willing dissolution of the bound family." For several heartbeats, nothing happened. The shadow remained poised over Thomas, seemingly calculating, assessing. Then it struck, not at Thomas, but at Jacob, wrapping darkness around his throat and lifting him from the floor. "The covenant transfers," its voice grated in their minds. "Eldest son to eldest son, he carries the obligation." Jacob struggled, gasping for air, fingers clawing uselessly at the insubstantial grip crushing his windpipe. "No!" Lucia lunged forward, breaking the circle. "The ritual failed." Emma grabbed her arm. "Wait, it's not attacking Thomas. That means something changed." Understanding dawned through her panic. The shadow couldn't take Thomas. The renunciations had partially worked, but Jacob, as Eduardo's son and covenant inheritor, remained vulnerable. "Jacob!" Emma called urgently. "You must renounce not just the name, but your father himself. Reject Eduardo Rivera completely." Jacob's face had begun to blue, eyes bulging as the shadow tightened its grip. With his remaining strength, he locked eyes with Emma and nodded once. "I reject," he choked out, "Eduardo Rivera. As my father, I am no son of his." The shadow's grip faltered momentarily. "More," Emma urged. "Renounce him completely." "My father died before I was born," Jacob gasped, invention born of desperation. "I am Maria's son only. No Rivera. Blood flows in me." The shadow released him suddenly, recoiling as if burned. Jacob collapsed to the floor, gulping air into starved lungs. "That's it," Emma realized. "The covenant passes through paternal bloodline. Deny that connection, and the shadow loses its claim," Lucia finished, helping Jacob to sit up. The entity writhed in apparent confusion or rage, its form fluctuating wildly. Outside, the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. "Together," Emma commanded, "all of you, renounce Eduardo Rivera as father and ancestor." Maria gathered her children close, Thomas cradled in her arms, Lucia and Jacob flanking her protectively. Their voices joined in ragged unison. "We reject Eduardo Rivera as father and ancestor. We claim no kinship with the Rivera bloodline. The covenant ends with us." The shadow convulsed violently, its form stretching and contracting in impossible geometries. A sound like distant screaming filled the apartment, rising in pitch until it exceeded human hearing. Then, as dawn light pierced the window, the entity imploded, collapsing into itself until nothing remained but a pinprick of absolute darkness that winked out of existence with a final furious hiss. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breathing and the gentle patter of rain outside. Thomas stirred in Maria's arms, colour returning to his cheeks, eyes clearing of fever's glaze. "It worked," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's over." But Emma, watching the empty corner where the shadow had vanished, wasn't entirely convinced. Such entities seldom accepted defeat permanently. "For now," she said cautiously, "be vigilant. Live as Galvezes completely, in thought, word, and deed. Never acknowledge the Rivera connection again." As she gathered her scattered supplies, Emma noticed something odd on the wall, where the shadow had been most concentrated. A faint outline burned into the wallpaper, resembling a family tree with branches severed near its base. The covenant might be broken, but its memory would linger in this apartment's walls, in the Rivera, now Galvez family's dreams, in the invisible scars they would carry forward. Some shadows, Emma knew, never truly disappeared. They merely retreated, waiting for darkness to return. 10 years later, autumn 1923, Emma Blackwood Gardner straightened her hat as Boston's crisp October wind tugged at its brim. At 52, silver threaded her once dark hair, and fine lines mapped her face like tributaries of experience. Marriage to Professor William Gardner had brought unexpected joy to her later years, though she had maintained her medical practice under her maiden name, unwilling to surrender the professional identity she'd built. The Simmons College campus bustled with young women hurrying between classes, their bobbed hair and shortened hemlines marking a generation far removed from Emma's youth. She smiled, recalling her own medical school days when female physicians were considered nearly scandalous. Outside the science building, she checked the letter once more, confirming the time and location. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly last week. Elegant stationery, familiar handwriting despite the years. Dr. Blackwood, if you find yourself still in Boston, I would be honored to have you attend my thesis presentation on October 15th at 3 p.m., Simmons College Science Hall, room 204. The subject may interest you particularly: folklore as psychological coping mechanism, case studies in family narrative. With enduring gratitude, Professor Lucia Galvez Emma climbed the stone steps, memories of that rain-lashed night a decade earlier still vivid despite intervening years. She had remained in Boston after the ritual, establishing a practice that specialized in women's health while discreetly researching similar cases of generational hauntings. Occasionally, she had glimpsed Maria or Jacob from afar, but had respected their unspoken wish to leave the past undisturbed. Room 204 was already half filled with students and faculty when Emma entered. She chose a seat near the back, observing the confident young professor arranging notes at the lectern. Lucia had flourished, it seemed, her academic achievements culminating in a teaching position at one of the nation's premier women's colleges. The presentation began promptly, Lucia's voice carrying clearly through the hall as she outlined her research into how families transform traumatic histories into folklore. She spoke of immigrant experiences, of narratives passed through generations that transmuted real suffering into metaphorical monsters and curses. "The family curse appears consistently across cultures," Lucia explained, "often masking generational trauma, abuse, or mental illness. By externalizing internal suffering into supernatural narratives, families create frameworks for understanding patterns of dysfunction." Emma listened, fascinated by the scholarly distance Lucia maintained while essentially dissecting her own history, never referencing the Rivera name or her personal connection to the subject. "I present one anonymous case study," Lucia continued, displaying a chart of deaths spanning 2 centuries. "A Spanish-American family that maintained a narrative of supernatural debt requiring child sacrifice. 4 deaths per generation, attributed to a shadow entity. Murmurs rippled through the audience, academic interest in such macabre subject matter. Analysis reveals a pattern of paternal filicide disguised as mysterious illness," Lucia stated clinically. The shadow provided cultural context for ongoing abuse, allowing it to continue unchallenged through generations. Only when the narrative itself was confronted and rejected did the cycle break. Emma felt a chill, despite the room's warmth. Lucia had reconstructed their experience through psychological theory, transforming supernatural horror into academic case study. Whether this represented genuine belief or necessary reframing, Emma couldn't determine. After the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Emma waited as Lucia spoke with colleagues and students. When the room had nearly emptied, she approached the lectern. Recognition dawned immediately in Lucia's eyes. "Dr. Blackwood, you came. Professor Galvez." Emma smiled. "Impressive work." They walked together across campus, autumn leaves crunching beneath their shoes. Conversation flowed easily between them. Lucia's research, Emma's practice, the changing world around them. Only after reaching a secluded bench overlooking the quad did Lucia broach the subject that connected them. "You must have questions about my presentation," she said quietly. Emma considered her response carefully. "I admire your scholarly approach. Recontextualizing the experience provides valuable perspective. Is that diplomatic phrasing for, 'You've convinced yourself it wasn't real'?" And Lucia's smile held no offense. "Do you believe it wasn't?" Lucia gazed across the campus, students moving between buildings like leaves blown by autumn winds. "Some days, I'm entirely convinced my father was simply a murderer who cloaked his crimes in superstition, that my mother was his unwitting accomplice, that what we experienced that night was mass hysteria triggered by trauma. And other days I remember the cold, the voice, the shadow that moved against natural law." Lucia shivered slightly. "The truth lives somewhere between folklore and fact, I think." Emma nodded. "And the others? How have they fared with their understanding?" "Mother passed 3 years ago. Influenza." Grief flickered briefly across Lucia's composed features. "She never spoke of it again, but kept blessed water by every door until the end. I'm sorry for your loss. And Jacob? Thomas?" "Jacob owns a furniture workshop in Vermont. Married with twin daughters." Lucia smiled. "He named them after our lost siblings, Sophia and Antonia. His way of reclaiming their memory, I suppose." "And he's well?" "No. Incidents?" "None. The Galvez family thrives, unburdened by shadows." Lucia hesitated. "Thomas is my reason for contacting you, actually." Alarm quickened Emma's pulse. "Is he ill?" "No, quite healthy. He's 20 now, studying engineering at MIT. Lucia reached into her handbag, withdrawing a small photograph of a handsome young man in collegiate attire. "Brilliant, dedicated, and recently engaged." "Congratulations to him," Emma said, not understanding the concern in Lucia's voice. "His fiancée is pregnant. Their child will be born next spring." Lucia's fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "The first birth in our family since everything happened." Understanding dawned. "You're worried the covenant might transfer to the next generation." "Irrational, I know, given my scholarly position on the matter." Lucia's academic composure faltered. "Yet I find myself watching shadows in corners, noting the moon's phases." Emma considered this, weighing rational reassurance against her own lingering uncertainties. "The ritual worked, Lucia. Thomas recovered. Your family has lived free of the shadow for a decade. But we never discovered what happened to it, whether it was truly banished or merely redirected." This had troubled Emma as well over the years. Entities powerful enough to maintain centuries-long covenants rarely disappeared permanently. "Has Thomas mentioned anything unusual? Dreams, sensations of being watched?" Lucia shook her head. "Nothing. He doesn't remember that night at all. He was too young, too ill. We never told him." "Perhaps that's for the best," Emma said. "Whatever its origin, supernatural entity or family pathology, the cycle broke when you collectively rejected the Rivera identity." "Then you think the child will be safe?" Emma thought carefully before answering. "I believe your family created a new narrative that night, one of resistance rather than submission, Whether we confronted an actual shadow entity or the shadow of generational trauma, the outcome remains the same. You chose to end the pattern. Lucia seemed to consider this, academic detachment reasserting itself. Fascinating how the mind constructs explanations that permit functioning after trauma. Perhaps that's all any folklore really is, the stories we need to survive our histories. They parted with promises to meet again, though both recognized the unlikelihood of such arrangements. Their connection belonged to another time, another understanding of the world, one increasingly distant in this age of automobiles, radio transmissions, and scientific rationalism. Walking back toward her home in Beacon Hill, Emma paused at a small Catholic church, its doors open to the autumn afternoon. Inside, candles flickered in red glass holders, their light throwing elongated shadows across stone floors. On impulse, she entered, sitting quietly in a rear pew. She was not religious in any conventional sense, but experiences throughout her life had convinced her that reality contained more layers than science alone could illuminate. A young priest nodded respectfully as he passed, then stopped, studying her with sudden interest. "Forgive me," he said, "but are you Dr. Blackwood? Dr. Emma Blackwood?" Surprised, Emma acknowledged her identity. "Father Morales mentioned you in his letters," the priest explained. "I'm Father James Sullivan. I took over his correspondence after he passed." "Dominic is dead?" Emma hadn't heard. "Last winter, peacefully in his sleep." Father Sullivan hesitated. "He left something for you, should you ever visit. Said you'd understand its significance." From a pocket, he produced a small crystal vial, identical to the one Morales had given her 17 years earlier in Mobile. "Holy water from the Vatican," Father Sullivan explained. "He was most insistent you should have it." Emma accepted the vial, its weight familiar in her palm. Did he say why? Only that some shadows retreat, but never truly disappear. A chill ran through Emma despite the church's warmth. Outside, the sun had begun its descent, afternoon shadows lengthening across Boston's streets. "Thank you, Father," she said, pocketing the vial. Some precautions, like some memories, were worth preserving, not from superstition but from wisdom. As she stepped back into the autumn afternoon, Emma glanced at her watch. She would be late for dinner with William if she didn't hurry. He would be waiting in their comfortable home, shelves lined with books on literature and science, windows bright against approaching evening. She quickened her pace, leaving the church behind, but carrying its message within her. The Rivera shadow might be gone, banished through ritual or rationalization. The Galvez family might continue unburdened by its ancestral covenant. Or perhaps, somewhere in Boston, a shadow gathered substance in a dark corner, patient as only ancient things can be, waiting for Rivera blood to flow once more through a newborn's veins. Some questions had no definitive answers, some stories had no true endings. And in every human heart, no matter how rational or educated, a small space remained reserved for the recognition that between light and darkness, between science and superstition, shadows moved according to laws beyond complete understanding. Emma hurried homeward, through streets growing dim with evening, keeping to patches of fading sunlight, careful to avoid the deepening shadows that stretched across her path.